I am never attempting to film a video during a layover. That was a terrible, terrible idea. But I am now in LA. I am trying to actively teach myself things related to personal finance, and I really wish that this is something that we were taught at an earlier age in high school or elementary school, because the only thing I remember from high school is that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Just kidding. But anyway, I know I'm not the only person in this boat, so today I'm going to talk about two things. First is how I perceive money, and second is a little more hands-on. I'm going to be actually building a personal finance tracker with you guys on Google Sheets, or you can use Excel, and it will be fun times. So there is a book you absolutely need to read if you haven't already. It's called Rich Dad Poor Dad. I actually was reading this again on the plane on my way to LA. This is a fantastic book. I'm sure my dad would be so proud of me for recommending this to you guys, because he was the one that told my siblings and I to read it at a young age, and some people love it, some people hate it, because he challenges the way that we're normally taught to think about money and to think about work. So he goes over things like passive versus active income, why you should have your money work for you, not the other way around. Highly recommend it. If you haven't already, just put this on your list. You won't regret it. On the topic of spending money, I think it's extremely important to prioritize your expenses, but even more important for you to even know what your expenses are. You guys are gonna be like, Sherry, I know what I spend my money on. A year ago, I decided I'm going to keep track of every single thing I spent my money on. Whether it's big or small, I put everything on a daily basis into this one Excel sheet. Let me tell you, at the end of the month, when I'm looking at that pivot table and I see this is how much money I spent on housing, on transportation, on groceries, and then on eating out. I spent an absurd amount of money on eating out, and I didn't even realize. And don't even get me started on how much money I spent back then on bubble tea. It is ridiculous. There are tons of templates online for personal finance trackers. You can just download one of those and use it. But if you're interested in building a finance sheet from scratch with me, then let's go ahead and hop onto my computer and do this. So I usually like to start with the columns and just putting the different items in. So things like what the date was, category, vendor, item, description. And for me, I actually like to specify the currency because I have to travel for work. I really need to make sure that I keep things consistent. So for the date column, I like to make sure I specify it in the date and time format. So one thing I do is create a sheet called Currencies. And essentially the reason I do this is because I have to travel for work or for leisure as well. And so I like to keep it consistent on my personal tracker that everything is in Singaporean dollars since I work in Singapore and I'm stationed there. You'll see that on the left, I have all the categories, and I love using this because you can go into the filter section and look at how much money you spent on specifically rent or telecom, broadband, things like that. What I find extremely helpful is actually making a pivot table, and essentially the whole purpose of this is for you to be able to track your monthly expenses across all the different categories. So what you do is select column A to G, and then you input it. I personally like to format it so that each month is a column and then each row is a expense category. You'll see that in row 2, there are a lot of segregated dates. So what I do is right click, create pivot date group, and then group it by the year and the month. This will make your life much easier. So for example, if I put in an expense for September, you'll see that it auto-populates in the September month column. Another thing I find helpful is to keep a balance sheet of my assets and liabilities. If you have things like loans or you do investments, then you can keep track of all that here. Another thing I find helpful is to have an income sheet. I use the exact same layout as my expense sheet. Essentially, this is good for people who are not only doing their full-time job, but if you're doing freelance stuff on the side or you have a second job, a part-time job, this is a great place to keep track of it. And I'm definitely the type of person to format my Excel sheets and make it all pretty. Another thing I think you should add is a cash flow sheet, and Shopify has a pretty good one that you can kind of rip off and use. Having this sheet is extremely helpful, and I think this is probably the most useful of them all because it's important to not only keep track of what cash is coming in or out, but also for you to be able to make predictions about what your financial situation is going to look like months down the road. If you continue to earn and spend the way that you do now, or if you wanted to splurge on a specific item, will you be able to do that? And what you can do is also conditionally format the rows so that if it's above a certain amount, it's in green. This way, at a glance, you can see, oh, if you were to spend this much money, will the next month turn red, as in you're in the negatives. For example, in column G, if I change it to 10,000, you'll see that it automatically turns red for the upcoming month. But if I were to magically earn more in the months of October and November, then you'll see that everything turns green again because I am once again in the positives. So I find that this is definitely the most useful sheet of them all. And so have fun. I hope you guys liked this tutorial and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.